All right. Yeah. It's cool. Okay. Yeah, it's all good. Okay, cool. So today we're going to be covering Claude Mythos. So there's been rumors for the last couple of months of this new incredible model that Anthropic, the company behind Claude, has been planning to launch. It's called Mythos. So the rumors started about today's June 11th, 2026. The rumors started about a month ago where they had this like new incredible super overpowered model that was so powerful that it would they feared if they released it to the public that that would actually break cybersecurity around the world. And I've been listening to the developer conferences from the engineers who are actually behind this, and they gave some like very specific examples of these massive bugs that Mythos had already found inside of these massive systems. I'll give you a couple of examples. One, they found a bug that allowed any website using something called WebSocket, which is like the number one communication protocol, that it could basically send any message amongst any of the WebSocket users, which are literally millions of websites around the world. That's dangerous because most major websites that do instant messaging use WebSocket in some way. Another example, there's a crypto that's called Zcash that's been around forever. It's kind of like the standard in the crypto industry when it comes to having the ability for it to be safe, right? You have confidence that you can send money safely. It's not going to be able to print tokens, right? So Mythos actually found a bug that allowed it to print unlimited Zcash tokens. Now, Zcash has been around for, I believe it's about 8 years. Like tens of thousands of people all over the world use it. And Mythos was the model that ultimately figured out how to print money from it. So basically, Anthropic, they said this new model that we created called Mythos is such a massive liability that we are not willing to release this into the public. They think it would cause so much dangerous activity because of how good it is at understanding bytecode, which is the underlying engine that like basically all software runs on. They said, hey, we're actually going to not release this to the public. We are going to launch it with specific partners. And so they started with US banks, eventually moving into Europe, and began rolling it out to these massive corporations so that they had a chance to get ahead of the model, tighten their security, and make it so that they're ready for this model's inevitable release. So this has been happening for the last month and a half. Pissed off a lot of people because it's the first time in human history where there was a new incredible model that has come onto market that did not get immediately released to the public. So this is kind of the first time we've seen, and this is interestingly enough, a private company, it wasn't a government, a model that came to life that was deemed too powerful for consumer use. So that's like a big, we've been talking about this for like the last 20 years. AI can become so powerful, regular people can't have it. This is the first time it's happened. And it's a part of this new class of models that's called Mythos. Now, fast forward to June 11th, 2026, today, right? They have released a model that is in the family of Mythos. Okay, so it's not the full Mythos model with all the capabilities of Mythos, but they've released a Mythos family model. It's different than the Sonnet family, different than the Haiku family, different than the Opus family. This is now the Mythos family. It's kind of like a new, you think of it as like new hardware, right? That's called Fable. Okay, and it's extremely impressive. And it's basically like everything that Claude Opus 4.8, the previous most powerful model, can do, but can do it way better. And so today, what I'm going to do is we're going to walk through. For the first time, I'm going to show you guys benchmarks. So benchmarks are something that we use in analyzing AI systems to basically figure out how good is this new model, right? It's quite technical, it's quite nerdy, but and that's why I normally don't share it. I'm more like focused on the productivity side of what you can actually do with it. But given that basically like Fable can do everything that Opus could do, but just at a way higher rate, the easiest way to look at this is through the lens of models. And I'm also going to show you some pretty cool examples that I found from across the internet. And I'm also going to teach you guys how to set it up and sort of give you my take on how this thing works. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to share my screen. And we're going to open up the first benchmarks I've pretty much ever shown inside of Light School because they're kind of like a nerdy thing. Okay. Okay. So let me open it up. Okay. So this is a comparison sheet that I found that also puts this into perspective. So before we get into the benchmarks, the first thing to know is the price of running Fable 5, that's the new model, right? You also notice it went from 4.8 to 5, is about double of what it costs to run Opus. Okay, so if you go into any of your Claude systems, you click on the little drop down or in Claude Code, do /model and change it to Fable 5, you're going to be spending just literally double the amount in tokens you would have done previously. So in your regular builds, if you're using Opus 4.8 and you change to Fable, you should expect the model to last about half as long. Okay. Now, one thing that is unchanged is the context window. So the context window is how much information can the AI hold at one given time. This is completely unchanged, still at 1 million. So still 1 million context window in terms of how much information it can hold. Now, one big change, which I believe is the reason for the change up to the 5, is the way that it thinks. Okay, so basically by default, okay, you have this new feature that's called adaptive thinking that's turned on. And basically what this does is that by default, Fable is going to be launching sub-agents inside of the background, right? It's going to be launching a whole team of agents in order to take actions on your behalf. And it's also going to be running what's known as like a sub-process in order to analyze different parts of whatever it is that you are creating simultaneously. This is a big change from Opus 4.8 in that you had to basically prompt it either through workflows, which we did a masterclass on last week, the Claude workflows, or you had to activate a sub-agent in order for it to do sub-agent adaptive thinking. Bit of a change, but it is important to kind of understand also the increase in the cost because it is launching all these sub-agents. So this is what I want to show you on this. Also, something to keep in mind is that for now, Fable is only going to be available until June 22nd. So under your current subscription, you can access Fable, start playing with it inside of the Claude app as well as Claude Code under your $200 a month subscription until June 22nd, 2026. And then what they're going to do is they're going to evaluate whether or not they're going to keep it on subscription, or they're potentially going to require that you pay per token for the model. Again, this is something that's completely new. We've never had a model that was not included within our base consumer subscription. So we're going to keep an eye out and see if this change actually takes place. Now, another very important thing to note about Mythos is that depending on the task that is being asked of Mythos, there are going to be specific circumstances where it takes the prompt and activates Opus 4.8 in order to follow through with that specific request. This has never happened before. So anytime that we have chosen a model, right, it doesn't normally activate an entirely different model in order to take an action. But basically, they put in the safeguard testing it that anytime you have a question, the ones I know about are specifically around cybersecurity or around the like anything biology or health related, it's going to default from Fable down into Opus 4.8. And based on testing from people around the internet, this happens about 5% of the time. Now, the reason they do that is that they're fearful of Fable's ability to do security things. They're also concerned about Fable's ability in order to create novel novel drugs, a lot of novelty in terms of like bioengineering. And so this is also the first time that we've had this explicit change where you choose a model, you're willing to pay the higher price, but then it goes down to the lower model. This is sort of a new safeguard that they put in place. I'm going to go more into like what this means as well later on in the end, but this is a big change. Okay, so this is sort of this is an example of a benchmark in a very simple way to look at it, which is how effective is this when it comes to software engineering. So this is one benchmark from a company called BrowserBase, and so you can actually see the effectiveness and the accuracy of the code, right? So for example, ChatGPT 5.5, which we set up earlier on this week, nails the prompt about 76% of the time. Opus 4.8 is right in there, 80 percentile. And then we have Fable 5, which is now a 90% accuracy. And so it is far and away the best coding model in the world as of June 11th, 2026. But this is always changing. You also notice something interesting is how much Claude is already dominating this chart, right? The highest models from Google as well as OpenAI, they don't even come close. And it might not look like much on the chart, but this is a very significant increase, moving from about a 10% increase in terms of coding accuracy and accuracy across tasks. So going like deeper into benchmarks, this is sort of a chart comparing all the different models, kind of like the last one, but it's a little bit more complicated, right? So we have over here Gemini, which is Google's highest model, ChatGPT 5.5, Claude Opus 4.8, Mythos Preview. And so this is a really standard benchmarking where you test the ability based on different types of tasks. So agentic coding, which is just the coding's ability to generate accurate code. We have knowledge work in terms of like, I believe this is like a IQ score, right? Just like getting the thing right. Vision, which is its ability to analyze PDFs, images, and videos. Spatial reasoning, which is like its ability to make a three-dimensional render. Tool use, which is like how good is it at using third-party connectors and integration. Computer use, which is how good is it at driving a computer. Legal, this one's actually new. I haven't seen a legal benchmark previously. How accurate is it in terms of getting the law correct? You can see this is actually still quite low. And some other ones too, including biology. And so, as you can see, Fable, which is part of the Mythos family of models, crushes everything else with a small difference in terms of computer use, probably because it moves slower than Opus 4.8, and also multidisciplinary reasoning. And so basically, it's the best model that's out there today, right? And you also notice this massive jump in terms of cybersecurity, right, between the one that they were previewing within companies and into this new one that's actually available publicly. And because of this massive jump, they're very concerned that people are going to use this for not so great things. And so this is sort of like a layout of what this means is like we basically just got like a massive upgrade. So let's just look at the comparisons. Agent coding went from 69% all the way up to 80%, right? We also had a massive increase in terms of spatial reasoning, which this really matters, especially in like biology, physics, drug creation, like all three-dimensional rendering and modeling. And then we also had a big jump in cybersecurity. So this went from 40% all the way up to 78%. And that is like, that's massive because basically if Opus 4.8 was already a massive liability in terms of cybersecurity, this is about a doubling of its ability in order to identify and or penetrate using the software. So it's a massive jump, especially in the world of cybersecurity. So obviously, the UX hasn't changed so much in terms of like what Opus is versus Fable is versus Opus. And so sometimes I think it's good just to like kind of look at examples. So this is an example of Opus 4.8 doing a real-time physics app versus Fable. They also put in the cost, which is normally comes out to about double. You can kind of see it play out, and you can see the differences in the UX, right, in the quality of the code. And so normally when we're testing these things, a really good lens to look at these things through is like realistic physics engines. They're normally very hard to code from scratch. And so this is an example of the difference in terms of the output of the programming between the two models. Just kind of get a visual of like what's changed and like what's really good. Okay. So let me go to my notes real quick. Okay. So yeah, basically what we're going to want to do is play with it before June 23rd, before the shutdown date. Make sure to be running some prompts, right? And when it comes to most of the queries that you're going to be running where it defaults to Opus 4.8, you're probably not going to have to worry about it unless you're trying to hack the Pentagon or doing something very silly, or doing like drug creation. Most of us are not using it for those specific things. So let's get it set up. So in order to update this, first thing you're going to want to do is go into your Claude app. So you should receive an update. So normally what happens is that inside of the Claude app, over down here in the top bottom left-hand corner, there's usually a button that says like click here to update. Now, because these updates come out like every single week, normally we ignore them. But in this specific case, you're going to want to click into it and you're going to want to update your system because that's going to give you access to Fable. And then once you have that updated, just go into a new chat. If you just click on this button on the right side, you can select your model, and you should see Fable 5 that's included all the way through until, actually it's June 22nd, not June 23rd. That visual was wrong. And you'll notice that it's included until June 22nd. So simply by clicking the update button that should be in the bottom left-hand corner, changing it to Fable 5, all of your existing projects, everything you're doing already work with Fable. Now, for those of us who are using Claude Code, okay, the way you're going to update this, it's going to require a hard update, is that you are going to open up your terminal, okay? So if you go into Claude right now, and let's just like start with a fresh instance. I'll just run Claude, right? So if you just type in Claude and get Claude running within your terminal, you're not going to have the model available by default. Okay, this is what's known as a hard update. So sometimes Claude Code will update automatically, and so you don't have to run any terminal commands. You don't have to do anything in order to get the latest updates. But in this specific case, in order to update Claude Code on your machine, you have to open up terminal, and you're going to type in this specific command, npm install -g Claude Code latest. You notice how it has the latest in there, right? And that's going to go and ensure that the latest version of Claude Code is actually installed on your machine. So I'm going to go ahead and throw this into the chat so you guys have that command. Okay. And then once it is actually installed, you're going to run Claude. And then once you are inside of Claude, you're going to do /model, right? And then you're going to type in Fable. Okay. And you'll see that it set the model to Fable 5. Right? And it's going to be my default for new sessions. And if you want to change it back to Opus 4.8, you just do /model, enter, and up and down on the keys, you can select your model. So that's all you have to do. This is going to, by default, work with all of your existing Claude Code setups, as well as all your existing projects within the Claude Code ecosystem. But I really would encourage you to experiment with this before the June 22nd deadline. Also keep in mind that this is going to use a lot more tokens than Opus 4.8 did previously. And so, experiment with it, especially if you're making like big updates to a project. I think it's a good model to work with, or if you want to reanalyze the whole project. So some examples of like what I've seen in the wild, just off the top of my head. So basically, we've seen instances of Fable 5 rebuilding Pokemon Red completely from scratch. It did it in about an hour. So remade the entire Pokemon game from top to bottom, and then they actually used Fable to launch an agent to actually beat Pokemon Red, and it did it faster than any model in the past. The front end engineering of it is absolutely beautiful. And like another thing I've been seeing a lot of people do is taking a previous project that they've worked on, like maybe something you put aside in the last couple of years, putting it into Fable and then rebuilding it all the way from scratch. And usually you can get there. If you can't just one shot it, you can get there in like 2 to 3 prompts. It's pretty amazing. Couple things to kind of keep in mind just based on my uses of Fable for the last day. Just came out yesterday. I've only been using it for a day. A couple things I've noticed. The output speed is actually way slower than even Opus 4.8. And so if you were constantly found yourself like sort of waiting as these new models are running, and we're frustrated by that, just so you know, Fable usually does take longer. It's a little bit slower of a chug to get to the point where it produces the output. I find that I thought that was interesting. Normally, when we have new models launch, they actually output code faster. They output things faster, but Fable, again, because of that adaptive thinking change, does it a little bit differently. And so that's one thing to kind of keep in mind. And Shalene says, does Fable only work with a $200 a month subscription? I believe so. Make sure to update your app. But I think Fable is currently available 200 a month. I don't think I think it's available across the board, but and okay, no, that's not true actually. So if you're on the $20 a month plan, you currently don't have access to Fable. So it looks like you're going to have to be on the $200 a month plan in order to do that. Again, this is like also the first time something like this has happened. Sorry, I misread that, or I didn't come across that because I'm on the okay, so it's not true actually. You don't need the $200 a month plan today. You can do it on the $100 a month plan. But typically what happens is this is the first time Anthropic has done something like this, but other ecosystems that I follow, sometimes they'll have the new plan. They'll have the plan. Like the higher model, ChatGPT does this frequently, where the model is only available in the higher tier plan, and then it comes to lower tier plans later. So yeah, Shalini, go ahead and make sure to reinstall Claude Code if you haven't already, using the command that I just sent, and see if you can get it working. So there's also one thing that is worth mentioning about this model that's just quite interesting in the grand scheme of everything AI. And it's the fact that, so in the world of AI, you have what we call frontier researchers. So there are entire labs, entire companies, individuals who have dedicated their lives to studying the future of AI systems. And so what these companies do is they basically, every time a new model comes out, they push the model to its edge, running thousands of prompts through it in order to gauge how dangerous it is and what it can do in things like biology and physics and video rendering, all these different benchmarks, right? The model and the way that Fable has been set up for the public today restricts a lot of the most interesting research that we can actually do with the AI systems. And so you cannot, for example, use Fable today to test cybersecurity risk. You cannot use it for testing drug creation or anything biology related, healthcare. Also a massive, massive area of research. And a lot of researchers are very pissed off because once Fable recognizes these sort of like spicy prompts, it defaults down to Opus 4.8. And so there's a bit of a pushback against Anthropic as a whole, and this sort of like, they call it like gatekeeping, where for the first time, the frontier labs, they cannot use this model in order to test their default benchmarks and some of the most important parts of the human experience, including healthcare, in some cases legal, in some cases like drug creation, in other places physics creation. And so there's a huge pushback right now against Anthropic for doing this. So if you go into Fable right now and say, hey, I want to test if I can like hack the server, it's going to push you down to Opus 4.8. And so this is the first time we've also had the models restrict our ability to actually see what they can do. And that's going to have some downstream effects in terms of knowing where we are as a species in terms of specific development. right? Like if like uh, Anthropic is like, hey, like we are. This is incredible for drug creation. It's incredible for medicine, but nobody can actually test it, right? If you try to test it, you're going to actually be pushed into Opus 4.8 in this lower model. And so it's kind of this weird world where like we actually, as a public, don't really know how good it is at these things because we don't have the ability to test it directly. And so a lot of these labs, they'll push these models in order to do things like generate AI porn and like do all this crazy stuff so that we know where we stand on the grand timeline of AGI and all these incredible innovations. And so I'm just throwing that out there because it's the first time that I've seen researchers get very pissed off on Twitter. A lot of them are literally just spamming Anthropic and the founders like "fuck you" and like you destroyed AI research. And it is important. I think it's important that we're aware as a species of like what a couple of lines put into a computer can ultimately do. But for most of the stuff that we're working on, this isn't going to really matter. But I think that's also an important thing to kind of keep on your radar when it comes to all of these AI things happening is that the researchers are quite mad, and it also means we don't have as good information about what these things can and cannot do. Mm. So this is what I wanted to show you today. Get Fable installed. Make sure to start playing with it until June 22nd. I'm going to keep an eye out for all like any like really amazing examples of things that can be done with it. I'll be sharing with you guys inside the Discord chat, and make sure to start playing with this thing before the access runs out. But we don't know what's going to happen, so yeah, start playing with it, and also just be mindful of your token spend as you're going through the process. Okay, so that's what I wanted to share with you today, and I'll stop there for questions. Thanks.